Nu optager den. Nu.
Welcome to a class of sentence analysis by Bruntt.
Okay, here the first thing we're going to do is examine how many sentences we have. And sentences run from full stop to full stop. So altogether here we have one sentence. And this sentence can then be examined as to how many independent clauses we have. So how many small clauses make sense on their own. And this is also only one independent clause, because even if you might think this is an independent clause, it isn't, because if I just say, when he came home, what then? It doesn't make sense on its own. So this is a subclause that depends on the rest of the clause. So when we start the analysis, we start by finding subjects and verbs in an independent clause. And this is the verb because I can ask I or I can put I or he in front of it, and it's the action, so this is the verbal. Then when we found the verbal, we ask who gave to find the subject, and it's Peter who gave, so Peter is the subject. And we say that these two belong together, the subject and the verbal. In the present tense, we can see that there is agreement, for example. Then we ask, what did Peter give? And here we can see he gave all of this. A big present that felt very heavy. So all of this is the direct object because all of it can be summarized by it or something. Peter gave something. So one pronoun can replace all of this and be included in that pronoun. And then I can ask, to whom did he give a big present that felt very heavy? To his daughter. So this becomes the receiver of the direct object, which is the indirect object. So the indirect object is always the receiver of the direct object. Then we're left with this bit here, all of this. And this tells us about, we can ask when to get this. So I can say, Peter gave his daughter a big present that felt very heavy. When did he do that? When did he give his daughter a present? And then when he came home is the answer. So when we can ask when, why, how, where, we get the answer of a circumstantial. Some grammars also call it an adverbial. So these are the circumstances that the action happened under, you could say. In this case, it is time. So it could also be place and manner and reason and lots of other small meanings that the circumstances give us. Now when we then have found, now we've found all the roles within the independent clause, which in this case is also the sentence because the full stop is there. So we found all the roles, all the sentence constituents, we call them. And then we have to examine what they consist of in this case, because sometimes the subject is a clause, sometimes it's a noun, sometimes it's a proper noun, so it can sort of be realized, it consists of different things. Or in other ways we can say that the role, like a role in a film, can be played by different actors. And every time when we found a role, we have to ask ourselves, is this some kind of group? Or is it some kind of subclause? This is the choice I have. So, if it's a group of words, it has a central element that is the most important element within the group of words. And if it's a subclause, it has a verb, and often it would also have a subject. And this is why we feel that this is some kind of clause, because this is actually a subclause. A subclause means that it's subordinated to the rest of the sentence, and it has a verb, etc. but it's not a proper clause since it doesn't make sense on its own. So it depends on the rest of the sentence. It has a role within the rest of the sentence, which in this case is a circumstantial. Okay, so we just have to examine all these roles to see if they are groups or subclauses. And we always write the role above the line and the content, the actor, below the line. So in this case, a subclause, because we can see that there is a verb in it. So I can begin to analyze it again. This one is a noun group, even though it only consists of one word, it has, the most important word is a proper noun. So some kind of noun, therefore it is a noun group. So noun groups can consist of nouns, proper nouns, and pronouns. Pronouns replace nouns, you could say. And then we can show that now we are done. No, I'll write proper noun here. And then I'll actually write Peter here to show that now we come to the word class and then we're finished. The next part here, the role of gave, that is a verb group, even though it only has one verb in it. And the most important word is the main verb, which tells us the action, gave. Done with that. Then you've got his daughter, which is also a noun group, because the most important element in here that gives the essential information is daughter, which is a noun. So, and it's the head, we call it. What you find before the head inside a group is a pre-modifier, and it simply means a describing word that modifies, that describes the head. In this case, there isn't any pre-modifiers. There is something that can only be found in a noun group, which is a determiner. The determiner tells us about how definite something is, who owns it, etc. So this is a determiner. It determines the reference of the noun, you could say. So this is empty here, the pre-modifier. And the determiner consists of a possessive pronoun, his. And then we're done with that. It could also, if I had wanted a pre-modifier, for example, it could have said, gave his beautiful daughter, gave his young daughter, something like that. But in this case, it's empty. Then we get to the long direct object here, a big present that felt very heavy. And as I said before, all of this belongs together because it can all be replaced by one pronoun. So it's not only this part, a big present, that is the direct object. It's all of it that goes into something or it. What did he give? He gave this. And as we said, it's a direct object. And when we look at which word is the most important word here, which is what we do when we find groups, it is the present that is the essential information, and that's a noun. So this is a noun group. Again, because present is a noun. So present is the head, and it's a noun. Done with that. Then we've got some words in front of the head, and the first one is this pre-modifier that was empty up there, but now it says a big present, so that's a describing word, which is usually an adjective when we are in a noun group. It could also be a noun, but in this case it is just the usual thing. It is the adjective, big, big, or biggest adjective. And then we've got the determiner in front to determine, is it any present, is it the present, is it his present, what is it, to determine who owns it and how definite it is. So this time it is an indefinite article. So either or n, and here because there's a consonant sound. Right? So now we've got a big present, and then we've got something after the head that also describes the head. And that is not called a pre-modifier then, because it's after the head, so it's a post-modifier. Post meaning after. So after the head, you describe the head by putting something afterwards. And in this case, this is another subclause. So you can see you can have subclauses within something else, like opening Chinese boxes or Russian dolls. Sometimes students find it difficult to understand why does this belong, if it doesn't help enough to say that all of it can be replaced by one word. But I could also move all of it together, so I could say a big present that felt very heavy was given by Peter, for example. So all of it belongs together when I move it to a different position, which also tells me that it's the same role. It belongs inside the same role. And it has this descriptive manner in the meaning, in the sense that I could also rephrase it and say a big, heavy present, for example. So we can see that this last bit describes in the same way as big describes. This just comes after the head. And as we said before, it's a subclause because again there is a verb. So it's like a clause, but it cannot make sense on its own. I cannot just say, that felt very heavy. What then? That felt, does it mean that felt very heavy? This is not the meaning. So it changes the meaning if I make it into its own independent clause. So therefore it is a subclause. It is structured in the sense that subclauses often start with a relative pronoun or an interrogative pronoun or a subordinating conjunction. And in this case, it is a relative pronoun. So we analyze it by finding the verb first, which is felt, and that's a verb group again, and it's only one verb. The head is the main verb, felt. I don't know if you can see this. And then you ask to find the subject, what felt, and then it's the that replaces the present. So the subject is that, which is a tricky word because that can also be a demonstrative pronoun, that board down there, or it could be like a subordinating conjunction, and that means at. He said that he was interested. But in this case, it is a relative pronoun, meaning sommer der in Danish. Which or who are other relative pronouns. So I could have said a big present which felt very heavy as well. And it always replaces the noun right in front of the relative pronoun. So now we've got the subject and the verbal within the subclause. And then we've got to ask ourselves, what did it feel? It felt very heavy. And in this case, it is not the direct object. It is the subject complement because it describes the subject, which is that. So it really means it is very heavy. So it shows identity and description of the subject, which means that it's a subject complement that says something about the subject. And you can always put a sign of equation. It is very heavy. It's the same as replacing with to be. So students often find it difficult to distinguish between subject complements and direct objects, but only certain verbs take objects and other verbs take subject complements. And if we can replace with to be, we know that if we can remove the verb in here and use a form of to be instead, it means that we have a subject complement because to be can never take direct objects. So it's the subject complement describing the present, really, that which describes the present. And in this case, this is an adjective group because the most important word is heavy. That gives the main information, you could say, most important information. And that is an adjective. And then we have something that describes, that modifies the adjective and or the head, and that is a pre-modifier. Okay, I've erased the bottom part of the sentence so that we have more space to write on here. So we determined that this was a subclause because we had a verb in it. And we can also see that it doesn't make sense on its own. I cannot simply say, when he came home, what then? It doesn't make sense on its own, so it can only be a subclause. If I remove this conjunction, it actually says, he came home. And then I might have put a full stop. And then it would have been a real independent clause where I could find the subject and verbal, and it might make sense on its own. So you would say, he came home, Peter gave his daughter, blah, 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 the rest of the sentence. But now we've decided that this is part of the other clause. So the when subordinates the clause into the other clause. So the when is a subordinating conjunction. Just like if, where, how, that, because, lots of those subordinating conjunctions that really turn a clause into a subclause by making it dependent, by making it part, by giving it a role within the rest of the clause. Right, then the verbal that I could put he or I in front of is came. As the verb group, even though there's only one verb, the main verb was the action, came. And then I ask, who came? And that is the subject, and that is he. It's a noun group, because the most important word, that's only one, is the personal pronoun, he. And then I can ask, where did he come? He came home. So that's a circumstantial, again, this time of place. So there is a circumstantial of place inside another circumstantial, you could say. And because it answers, where did he go? Where did he come? When, where, how, why, to find the circumstances. And that's an adverb group, because the most important word here is the adverb home, which means a place. In this time, other context, it could be a noun. I live in a home. But in this situation, it is an adverb that tells us about the place where you come. So now we've actually done the whole thing and found all roles and actors.